Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
What is the location?
Walk away from there, okay?
Hello and welcome back to Stolen From Me. I'm your host Lindsay, and this week, by the title you can tell, I have changed things up. It was supposed to be San Francisco Witch Killers, but I decided to swap it for Diane Downs. Diane come with the usual listener discretion. She is just... yes, we'll see. Just, that's all I can say. The second thing is I'm going to try and aim for 2 episodes a week. Obviously, this might be hard work as I have a family and a life and everything else. But I really want to get more content out for you, so I really am hoping to do 2 episodes a week. If for some reason I can't manage it, I'll all let you know and I will go back to 1 episode. So as I say, listener discretion is advised, and all the information I have I found online through various different sources. And then I just put into this episode, and I believe all the information to be true. So, this is the case of Diane Down. On the 19th of May, 1983, Diane Down arrived at the hospital with their 3 children in her car. 2 in the back, 1 in the front. They'd all been shot. There was blood all over the inside of the car. Diane was waving at medical staff for help. "Somebody has just shot my kids," she shouted. Diane's behaviour was what you definitely wouldn't expect from a mother. She was really just not emotional at all. The medical staff thought this was a bit strange, and they said that they thought maybe she was in shock. Even when Diana was actually told that her little daughter, Cheryl, who was only 7 years old, had died on arrival at the hospital. They then said Danny, who was only 3 years old, is now paralysed from the waist down. Christy, who was 8 years old, has suffered a stroke. Now poor Cheryl has lost her life, and Danny and Crystal seem to be fighting for their life. And Diane really didn't react to this. The police arrived to interview Diane to find out what had happened to this family. Diane explained that they'd been out, and then on the way back they decided to go sightseeing. This would be fine and fully acceptable if it wasn't 10 o'clock at night and dark. How many people take their kids out in the dark sightseeing? Unless it's Christmas, of course. Diane decided to go down to a little back road. She'd never been down this back road before, and she loved adventure, so she thought, why not? She saw a man standing there by the side of the road. He was a hitchhiker. He was a bushy-haired man, and he was waving for her to stop. It was dark. She had 3 sleeping kids in the car, and she thought the right thing to do was pull over. Diane got out of the car with her keys in her hand and went over to the man and asked if he needed any help. He told her that he wanted her car. She said, "You've got to be kidding me." He started to fight with Diane for the keys in her hand. Then she saw he had a gun. He then walked over to the car and fired several shots inside the car, which they all hit the children. He then shot Diane in the left arm. She pretended to throw the keys so the man would actually leave her alone. Then she jumped into the car and managed to escape, and she raced to the hospital to get help for her kids. While she was being treated for her gunshot wound on her arm, a nurse told Diane that she'd be able to see her kids soon, and Diane just laughed it off and said that they were in the best place and it's a good job she's got good insurance. She was told that the police would want to speak to her again, and she just replied, "She has no makeup on." The police and the medical staff become more and more suspicious of Diane. Her behaviour is far from caring, and with all the laughing and joking she's doing with staff, she's acting like she hasn't a care in the world. She even said that if her kids were going to die, just let them die, just don't let them suffer. Medical staff noticed that Diane had actually wrapped her own arm up but not treated her own kids. Now, what mum would actually stop? And while your kids are choking on their own blood and bleeding out in the car, what mum would wrap her own arm up? I don't know. Now, police started to do their investigation. They obviously didn't have a murder weapon, but the investigation began. Diane went to visit her kids, but as she was then going to do that, she decided to phone up someone called Robert Nickelbocker. This is the man that she was having an affair with some time ago. She decided to call him before the actual father, who was Steve Downs. Now, in a diary, what was later found, it was discovered that Diana had wrote loads of letters to Robert, and that said that Robert basically just wanted to stay with his wife. He didn't want to be with Diane. After calling Robert, she did in fact call Steve Downs, and he arranged to get a flight out to see his kids. Steve and Diane met at high school and later went on to marry in 1973. They had 3 children together, Crystal, Cheryl and Danny. They divorced in the 80s, or 1980 to be precise, due to Diane having an affair. And Danny, he thought, wasn't his child. They remained civil and he still called them all the time to make sure the kids were alright. But that was it. This seems strange that she would actually call Robert, who didn't want anything to do with her, but Steve, who was actually the children's dad, she made him wait. So Robert actually did come forward and say that he did know her and they was having an affair, and he made it clear to Diane that he wanted to make his marriage work. Then Diane would later on go on to stalk Robert, and he even feared that she would kill his wife, and she wanted to be with him so bad she would do anything. The police began to believe that the children were shot by a .22 caliber gun. They did ask Diane if she owned a gun and she said no. But Steve and Robert actually came forward and said that Diana do own a .22 caliber gun. Powder burns on the children's skin indicated that the weapon had been fired at point blank range. Blood splatter all over the car doors and seats. Police believe that the murderer did stand on the left-hand side, which is what actually Diane said had happened. To make matters worse, Diane would actually go on to do a lot of interviews. She actually said that she didn't really feel lucky, and this is her words.
You sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died.
Now, that's not a rational mum talking. Whether you're in shock or what, that's just not a rational mum talking. She's smiling through her interviews and worried that she couldn't tie her own shoes up. Diane would then go on to demonstrate what happened the night of the shooting, and her behaviour and laughing in a joking manner was shocking. She even joked that she banged a cast and it hurt like. Then she paused. The police actually did believe that she was then going to say, "When I shot myself." And this is what happened.
There. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. This is worse than this. Okay.
It's actually shocking to see a mother laughing and reenacting the worst time of her life. She's laughing as though she's having the best day of her life. Diana became pregnant again. This is said to have been perfectly planned on Diana's behalf. It's believed that Diana got pregnant by a postman who was working on her rounds, and when asked about her pregnancy, She said that you can't replace a kid, but you can replace the feeling they give you. And this is how she said it.
To see him try to take this baby from me, and I got pregnant because I miss Christy and I miss Danny and I miss Cheryl so much. I'm never going to see Cheryl on earth again. And you can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability, they give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy, and that's gone. They took it from me. But children are so easy to conceive.
Children are so easily conceived. Now, you can tell she didn't care about her kids at all. They were just a prop to her. And that's what they'll always be, a prop to her. Diana loved attention, even while this would have been any parent's worst time of their life. She seemed to be really enjoying every single second of it. So much so that you wouldn't even think that one of her children had just died and two were fighting for their lives in hospital. When Diana visited the hospital to see Danny and Christy, the nurse on the shift noticed that Christy's heartbeat on the monitor increased when Diana walked in the door. And when Diane actually grabbed Christy's hand, her heartbeat went dramatically up. This made the nurse concerned, and she told the police. Now, this just added to the police not believing in her story about the bushy-haired man. When Diana did the reenactment on the day of the murders, this was kind of a good thing in a way, because a few people actually see this on telly, and someone came forward and said that the night of the shooting, they saw Diana's car driving around 5 miles an hour. Now, they remember Diane's Nissan driving that slow because they actually had to take over her. And if this was a mother speeding to the hospital to save her children's lives, then why was she only seen going 5 miles an hour? In all the interviews I've seen Diana do, all she ever does is smile when she's talking and really show no emotion at all. I understand that you can have a nervous smile or laugh, but this is more, I love the attention, and she's smiling and you can just tell in her eyes that there's just nothing there. In Diane's diary, she said that she would do anything for Robert. She spoke about how he had a perfect place in her empty heart. But he kept saying he doesn't want kids, he doesn't want her kids because he doesn't want to be a dad. She even said that her kids isn't that much trouble, but he said no, he wanted to be with his wife. Police asked again if Diane had a gun, and she said no. The .22 caliber shells were actually found at the scene, and then when they searched Diane's house, they had a perfect match of the shells at her house too. They didn't find the murder weapon, but they did find a rifle and a unicorn plaque which had her kids' names creepily engraved on it. The police was looking to arrest Diane, but they needed more sort of concrete evidence because they knew that if they would go in now, that wouldn't be enough to arrest her and lock her up for good. They needed one of the children to say something, and now, with Danny only being 3, it was left to Christy, and Christy had had a stroke. But Christy was working really, really hard with the medical staff and a therapist, and the therapist told Christy to write down who did this to her and her brother and sister, and then throw it in the fire. Christy did this several times over, until one day she was able to open the piece of paper and reveal the name on it, which read, "My Mum." This must have been so difficult for Christy to do. All the evidence was pointing to Diane. She was completely unemotional. She had a witness see her driving at 5 miles an hour to the hospital. There was blood splatter on the outside of the car. The gun used was actually the same bullets from her house. She actually kept walking into Christy's room, and with her heartbeat increasing, obviously that shoe that Christy was scared of her own mum. Police arrested Diane 9 months after the shooting on February the 28th, 1984. Diana told police that she did in fact actually know who shot everyone, and she was going to go get them. The police charged Diane with 1 account of murder, 2 accounts of attempted murder, and 2 accounts of assault in the first degree. Diane's trial, some people say that she actually got pregnant because she wanted them to feel sorry for her. Now, she thought the jury would definitely feel sorry for her, but this wasn't the case at all. Now the police had Diane, and Diane is now facing her court case. But Diane was heavily pregnant, and she thinks this is going to keep her out of jail. The jury heard Diane's interview tapes, how she showed no emotion at all about 1 of her children being killed and 2 almost killed. The prosecution states that Diane attempted to kill her 3 children to be with Robert. Diane's 9-year-old daughter Christy takes the stand and proceeded to tell how her mother was the one that shot her and her brother and sister, how she got out of the car and she walked around the back and pulled something out of the car and then shot them all. Diane is still full with confidence and smiles at all times. On the night of the shooting, Diane said her daughter said that she remembered a song playing on the radio. Now, if Diana actually got out of the car and took her keys with her, Diane's car was so old that had to have the keys in the ignition to play the radio. So that was another lie. They actually played the song in the courtroom, and actually Diane started dancing along to it, and her defence lawyer actually told her to stop. Now, on the 25th of May, Cheryl's funeral actually took place, and this was a really sad day for friends and family. But Christy and her brother was showing signs of improvement, with Christy being able to speak now. She did have her arm was paralysed, but she was improving greatly. Her brother was paralysed and would never be able to walk, but his brain was showing no lasting effect, and he was improving as well. 6 weeks after the trial, on June the 17th, 1984, the jury come back with all 5 counts of murder, attempted murder and assault. They found her guilty. Life in prison plus 50 years. She wasn't eligible for parole for another 25 years. Diana was diagnosed with narcissistic tendencies and an antisocial personality disorder. 3 years into Diana's sentence, July 1987, she actually escaped from prison by jumping over the fence. She was later found in a nearby house and was given an extra 5 years on top of her sentence. Diana has applied for parole several times, but been refused. She has never admitted to what she was convicted for. From the footage I've actually seen, she does believe that she's going to get parole. She's even said that when she does, she wants her parents to go into hiding with her, because there is a lot of crazies out there. But Diana would never admit to killing her child and trying to kill her other 2. Now, one fantastic thing, if you can have anything that's good that come out of this, is Christy and Danny were actually adopted by the leading prosecutor, Fred Huggy. He actually adopted her, but the baby that Diana was actually carrying, she actually gave birth to shortly after going to jail, and she was named Amy Elizabeth, but later changed to Becky. She was actually adopted into a loving family, and she actually found out that Diana was her mother when she was 11, and kind of tricked the babysitter into telling her. She actually made out to the babysitter she actually knew who her mother was, and the babysitter tripped up and told her. This is the case of Diana Downs. I really hope you enjoyed it. My throat is really bad today and recording was really, really hard. Thank you ever so much for listening, and I will see you on Thursday for another episode. I'm not going to say what we're going to record because I might change my mind. Please don't forget to subscribe and ring that little bell. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No one wants to go to jail for things.